right. You have my camera, I guess. So, okay.
Yep, it's recording now.
All right,
All right,
great.
yeah. So I'd like to introduce special guest today, Professor Sarni. Professor Sarni, for the audience that does not know you, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Professor David Sarni. I'm an adjunct professor at John College of Criminal Justice. I have been there for almost about 8 years and change so far, hopefully continuing my career there. I retired as a New York City police detective after 27 years in the NYPD. I started out in 1995 as the last hired housing class. I then was assigned after my time at the academy to PSA 4 Manhattan South, the Housing Bureau. I worked as a PCO, what's called a Project Community Officer, and then anti-crime for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then in 1997, I had the opportunity to go into the Manhattan South Downtown Narcotics District. I worked in the Organized Crime Control Bureau. I was an investigator assigned to the 9th Precinct, where most of the work we did was involving narcotics operations, buy and bust operations, short, long-term case buys, dealing with the neighborhood, any complaints the neighborhood had about drug activity, conducting search warrants, cultivating confidential informants. I did that until about 2012. And from 2012 till about 2005 to 2012, I was at the 9th Precinct Detective Squad. I was there about 7 years. My primary responsibilities were conducting robbery, burglary, grand larceny investigations. But what we did, pretty much as the detectives, whatever we had to investigate, we were involved. From 2012 till I retired in 2022, I was assigned to the Detective Bureau Training Unit. With the Detective Bureau Training Unit, we're involved in training all of the newly assigned investigators to the Detective Bureau. We helped develop courses for the Homicide Investigators course, the Special Victims Investigators course, Criminal Investigators course, which is one of our big draws. We developed an Interrogators course for the Detective Bureau for the NYPD. I was involved in training numerous civilian and uniformed members of the service throughout my time in the Detective Bureau. And after I left that, I stayed with John Jay College, and I still today do training for unarmed security. And I also still do part-time work for school security and retail security. So I keep myself kind of busy even after retiring.
So you're retired, like air quotes.
Yeah, I'm kind of not hearing you. Hold on a second.
Hold
yeah,
on.
I'm retired. Yes, better. Thank you. Couldn't hear
Yeah,
you.
because my mic was over there. Yeah. No, I used air quotes
Okay.
when I said I said retired. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
So you're
I've
not
been
entirely
retired.
retired.
Yeah, you never retire. You retire from one position, one career, and you have the opportunity to continue on doing others. Then you do so until when it's time. And right now, it's not my time to finish up teaching and still working.
How come you decided to teach? What inspired that?
Well, I started when I went to Brooklyn College. I finished my degree in political science. I started teaching pretty much right out of college. I started at a place called Brooklyn Academy Prep. I was there as a teacher and a counselor. I then left that. I went to St. Mark's Lutheran. I started teaching middle school. Then I had the fortunate opportunity to teach at my old high school, Bishop Ford Central Catholic High School in Brooklyn. That no longer is open, but I taught there for a few years. And during that time there, I actually worked with some of the teachers I had as my teachers. I then left the school and I continued doing other work until I had the opportunity to take the NYPD exam. And once I did, I had a client of mine. I was doing some work, and she was an attorney, and she said, "Listen, you might as well take the test. It guarantees you a career." And fortunately, I took her advice, and I'm not sure if she's with us anymore, but I just thank the opportunity to give me that idea to take it. I took the test, and the rest is pretty much my career with the NYPD.
Seems like an interesting change of pace between, going from a detective to a professor, but I'm glad that you're happy with it.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I've always enjoyed the concept of teaching. I thought when I started teaching high school around the age of in my 20s, which was kind of difficult because of the age difference, which wasn't very big, and it was very hard to get positions in teaching. It was a transition because it kind of went its way. I did my detective work, I did my police work, and when I always look at opportunity and the chance to go into training for the police department, it was just an outlet for me to change my career structure, I guess, to get that chance, and I took it.
Did you ever struggle with when it came to teaching high school? Did you ever struggle with respect at all because of the age difference? Was that part of it?
It was a bit of a struggle, but what you do is you have to be a professional. You maintain that professional status with all your students. Even though they were close to my age, like they would think I was their friend, the concept always has been, I will be friendly, but I'm not your friend. There's a position of authority that I have, and I've always maintained that. And you develop that respect, because then they realize that's how the respect is. You're not their buddy. You're there to do a job to make them better students, give them the chance to move forward in their careers. And even though it's only at high school level at that time, and now college, I still have that thing that I just want to keep that respect aspect to it. You always maintain professional status in any of the careers you take, so you don't break that barrier with your students.
Right. Well, it's also, the age difference isn't the same as it seems that it was when you were teaching when in your 20s, because you oftentimes younger teachers tend to always have that issue of gaining respect from their students, and they don't know really how to get it sometimes, usually due to a lack of experience as well, which is also problematic. But with regards to your career in the NYPD, what was the happiest moment of your career?
As the happiest, I take a culmination of things. The happiest is, I was able to make detective, and that was something that I always appreciated, the opportunity that I had to go into an investigative unit, become a detective. And my happiest moments were being a detective. I think even though sometimes a job wears you down, you always respect the position that you got. You respect the shield. You respect the position. And throughout the work, I was always proud of the work that I did. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity to work with great people, great detectives who helped guide me through the process, and great bosses who saw the ability that I had to do the work. And when I'm happier, when I'm actually able to, appreciate and be appreciated. Sometimes you don't get a chance to see that with your victims or your complainants. But when sometimes they wrote notes about, how they were treated, how they felt they were treated respectfully, even though the cases may not be solved or cleared. It was something that my whole thing about being the happiest is always treating the people I dealt with respect and dignity. And that's where my happiest moment was. Even though there are times you work with people who are, you're dealing with perpetrators who aren't good, who are really bad, you always keep that modicum of respect. And the happiest is doing the work that, I was given the chance to do.
I remember when I had my interview with Peter Vicelli.
Mhm.
That's where you saw one of my posts. Actually, I did an interview with him, and when I was talking to him, he spoke very similarly, and as well as with Jim DiOrio, former head of the New Jersey FBI. I had him on, and both of them spoke about how it's important to keep an open mind when you're talking to any suspect, and like you're saying, to give them a level of respect and keeping an open mind. Right. I mean, Jim, for example, he given his position in like various circumstances, he would interrogate people that worked for Al Qaeda, right? And
Mhm.
to have a level of respect even there is obviously very difficult, but remaining calm and like you're saying, being open, or like Peter said, to remain open-minded, in your case to be respectful. So this kind of relates to something that I was interviewing yesterday, which is about the most upsetting, right? What's the most upsetting moment of your career?
There've been numerous. I think along with the position you have, when you have deaths of individuals that, September 11th being one of those type of moments that, there are people that I knew who were in the tower who didn't make it. There's points of sadness. I can't say that was probably the worst in the sense of what you had to deal with, and understanding that this is out of your control in a sense, but you want to make it. You've got to deal, and anytime there are moments of sadness, and I mean I've responded to New Year's Eve one time I'm working night watch, and I had to respond to a dead infant. Apparently, this family during New Year's Eve took their child out, and to keep the child warm, keep the infant warm, the victim, but the mom had the baby's head close to her chest, and she might have, and we don't know what the end result is. I mean, there was a case detective that took it, but you have to actually sit there and deal with something that's probably the most tragic thing you would experience and a family would experience, and still remain professional. I moments of sadness and tears, they happen, but you do your job. And even as saying September 11th and the aftermath being the saddest, and experiencing that, professionalism, detective work supersedes that. So you take your emotions and you have to compartmentalize and put it to the side. So when I say saddest, emotionally, I'd say that time, but you still had to do a job where you're still working 12-hour tours. You're still at the site, both at the towers where they stood and at the landfill where you worked, and you do your job. And even moments of emotional, where you can get emotional and got in that sense, you move on, you move forward.
So, what did you learn from sort of seeing that, I guess, is, like what did you learn from seeing these sorts of tragedies?
You control what you can control. And what you do as an investigator is, if, as a criminal act, you want to see the right thing done for both the victim, and you want to prevent things like that from happening again. And the work that you do hopefully does that. The consistent, detailed functioning of what investigators and detectives do, even though that case may not be solved, what you did in that case may prevent other incidents like that from happening. And you learn from that. And you can't control everything. You can't solve every case. You can't get every complainant to be cooperative. You can't get that confession, but you do the right thing. Because I always think justice is kind of arbitrary, depending on what side of the coin you're on. When I do work, or what makes it better is doing the right thing, doing everything. And I like what my boss used to say, morally, legal, and ethically sound. If you maintain that throughout your career and throughout your work, you're doing what's right.
What would you say to people that almost feel on a personal level attached to some of these cases, like police officers, where they might feel a little bit emotionally overwhelmed, at least at first?
One of the good things I think many agencies are doing, many departments, even the NYPD, is giving people some aftercare when they respond to events like that. There was a really tragic incident where a mother drowned her kids in Coney Island at the beach, and these officers respond, grabbing these kids and taking them from the beach, trying to get them resuscitated and get some life into them, but it was too late for them. We're getting better at engaging those cops who are in those most traumatic situations. When I was working, it was very limited, if at all. We just sort of move on from A to B to C to D. And there was no thought process to help those officers in trauma. And the job kind of in itself kind of tries to make you invincible in that. Just the career choice that you make. You want to be the strong person. You want to be the person people look to. But there are times and moments where it's tragic. My old partner would never, he goes, I would never be able to handle a child case because he had kids. And he engaged himself in a career choice within the department not to gauge that. But we deal with these situations, and we're getting better with caring about it, with trying to work with the officers who are in those traumatic situations, because before we didn't. We're learning that. And one of the things I said, as me a part of the job, I was the A to B to C to D guy. You think about it, move on to the next. Think about it, move on to the next. You're seeing a change, and it's a very positive change for a lot of agencies that they're looking to do sort of a traumatic assessment for each of these cops who respond. And I think when I spoke to one of them did go, and after he went to involve, he was at a shooting, and it was a bad shooting. And he goes, they've reached out. The job kind of, made us go speak to someone about this, which is a good thing. I think we're getting better with that.
Well, on the note of, I guess, training or helping or guiding people after the witness these events, there has been a bit of discussion. I feel like there should be a little bit more on this about training police officers, right? And while the discussion is pretty big, there is one thing I've learned in the past, which is the ratio between police learning de-escalation tactics and how to actually deal with the situations, right? Where there's much time to be considered and put into and poured into dealing with situations, which is absolutely important, but also there's seemingly a lack of time between how to de-escalate, or a very little bit is to put into de-escalating situations. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the term is such a broad term, and it gets into this terminology, and it gets into this word salad. De-escalation has been what police have been doing. Many police have been doing for decades. At one time, it was called verbal judo. It really, what you're trying to do is bring the temperature down. De-escalation is trying to get people to think rationally at that moment, and cops are doing that. Old timers were really good at it, and they didn't call it verbal judo. They just talk people down. That's how they thought of it as. I think the problem is the youth of America don't really communicate well, and that's, I think, more of the issue than anything else. And it's an overall problem where we've created this social dynamic where social media and installation via text and everything like that has created a difficulty for people to speak on both sides, both the officers involved and both the persons involved in maybe that escalated situation. And when we get to a scene, a gun is going to be there, which is usually the officer's gun. And now you have the authority of the uniform. And now you have to try to relate to that person. And that's what really, de-escalation is relating to that person's situation and trying to talk them down from that from that anger, whatever it's going to be, either anger, depression, sadness, whatever it is, and try to relate. And, officers have been very good at it for a very long time. It's not been with that de-escalation word. It's been done. It's just now talking is harder. I think communication for people is a lot harder, especially direct interpersonal communication. And, that's where I think overall is the problem. We're not training people how to talk. You're going to the escalation situations and you're given scenarios and you're like, sir, ma'am, this, and sort of you have to sort of bring your own into it, bring your own persona in it. I've worked with people who have a different persona than me, and they calm things down much differently than I do. And there are times what the way I respond is different, but it's still looking to do the same thing, the same objective, to relate to someone's problem. We're not sympathetic, we're empathetic. And that's really de-escalation, is empathy, is expressing empathy and understanding. So de-escalation is a term, and I know a lot of companies utilize it, and we and police departments utilize it because we have to justify how we talk, and no one knows the explanation because old timers couldn't explain how they did what they did. So, and then they create terminology for it. And de-escalation is that. It's just talking. It's just learning how to communicate, learning how to relate. Cops may not know how to relate because of the position that they're in or their lifestyle that they're in. But we have to learn to relate to them and listen and hear their names. John, what's your name? John, what's the problem, John? I see you're upset, but I need to know what's going on so we could talk this out, because I don't think we have to get to this level. I've talked more people into handcuffs than I've had to really fight all the time. And that's how it works, because it's talking. That's the hardest purpose in the world. Sometimes you can get to talk them into handcuffs. You don't always have to escalate it. There are times, unfortunately, the person that you're engaging is already at that moment, and you're going to have to do something. You may have to require to use some sort of force to enable something. But a lot of times it's talk. We learn to talk. We have, one mouth, two ears, and we have to listen more than we talk, but we have to talk. And that's the hardest part, I think, for police who are younger generation. I'm an older person, but I was out in the streets when I was a kid. I met people. I wasn't on computers and online and on a phone doing all my work and everything. Now that's changed it, along with a pandemic that really socially isolated a lot of people. And now a couple of years later, you're trying to engage these who are 18, 19-year-olds. Now they're 22 and 23, who now are in positions of authority, and you're asking them to talk to people and relate. And it's hard. We're doing our best to train it, but really, I think more people, we really have to get more into active listening and communication, talking skills. How do you talk to somebody? De-escalation is great, but it's not talking to somebody. We're creating a title. Talk. If we said we learn how to, we relate to people, that's de-escalation.
Well, a lot of people I've noticed, and it could just be an illusion of videos online going viral, but it seems like nowadays, especially, there's kind of a lack of respect for police officers, especially, right? Which is completely undeserved. But with regards to that, and people having this sense of disconnect between a police officer and them, and almost seeing them in some cases as oppressors, right? Um, where now people are fighting back against police more often, I've noticed as well. I don't know if that's, just a me thing, or if everybody notices that, or if you even see that. But what are your thoughts on that phenomenon?
Well, it's more prevalent because social media does that. And usually you'll get videos showing confrontations with police. And a lot of that has been emboldened by a lot of the anti-police sentiment, not just from the public, but from you're dealing with local, city, state, and federal governments where you've marginalized policing as a career, as a profession. And you've created this dynamic for things that, police have always been around. Police exist for a particular purpose. They're part of the executive branch. They're here to maintain order. They're there to protect those who can't defend themselves, to enforce the laws when applicable, and to apprehend perpetrators, people who are committing crime. That's our job. Somewhere along the line, that kind of changed, and a lot of that comes through legislation, anti-police sentiment, which is extremely unwarranted because each individual cop is who they are. An agency may be relegated to a pigeonhole of bigoted or racist, but what really states that? I'm a cop, and I've been a cop. I was a cop for 27 years, and not any time did I see people overstepping their boundaries, doing things that were considered illegal, excessive use of force and the like. But since you get a steady diet of that, even if you Google and you put police officer assaulted, the first thing that comes up is police assault this person or police attack this person. And that type of line, that type of headline, that type of clickbait, changes people's mentality about police. When you have riots of situations that happened in another state and then being relegated to being part, like Klansmen, and this is not what police have been doing. Years ago, and I use this because I remember we had a blackout here around 2003, and we were standing in front of a well-known establishment for the LGBT community, and the neighborhood applauded us, and we were doing anything. We're just there to maintain, direct traffic and make sure the stores are okay because it was a blackout. But now you can't. All you see is this anti-sentiment, and it's been risen by the people who are supposed to be working with legislators, prosecutors' offices, district attorneys, who have vilified the profession, where you can't find people who want to take this job. And I'm there to tell people that it exists for a reason. And if you treat people with respect and you expect people to be treated with respect, like police, you can't pigeonhole us and say everyone is A, B, or C. We're not. Each cop is different. Each cop handles things differently. But it's unwarranted as an overall position. You're seeing the end result of that. You're seeing the decriminalization of so many things in not just New York, but elsewhere. And you're seeing a rise in crime that you can't control. The stem of the tide has, if you look at Oakland, and I've been to Oakland several times, and there was a mall. They just closed the In-N-Out Burger, the only one in Oakland. They're closing the only Denny's in Oakland, and I know exactly where they are. And that was an economic failure when they had a Walmart there that closed, and nothing came back to support it. You have a blight on society. You're closing. These stores are closing because the amount of crime that's taking place. And who's suffering? Those who live in those areas of high crime. And who are they looking for? They're looking for police. They're looking for us to do the job. But these legislators have created such animosity toward police. I mean, we had a prior mayor of New York who pretty much vilified the police. And until he realized the high rate of crime, you need the police. And I think we have to also look at, there's a former police commissioner, Bill Bratton, and he has Peel's Principles of Policing. He said he always used to keep a copy of it put in his pocket. And when I watched a webinar with him, and I decided, let me use that in my class. And there's one line that always stands out. The police are the public and the public are the police. I'm paraphrasing it. But that's the reality. We're all the same. We're all doing, we don't get the job done without the public's help. And the public needs the police to make sure crime doesn't occur in their neighborhood through either police work, by police presence, by investigations that generate arrests for the crime they commit. That's the problem. And I think we've forgotten that. And I think if everyone looks at it and realize we're all partners in this, as opposed to enemies. And there are times I can understand that police have been considered like occupiers. I mean, there was years of zero tolerance with the NYPD, and when we were dealing with certain blocks that had high crime, they were actually, cops would stand a post and actually check IDs to allow people back into their areas. And I know about that. And that was a major, we're looking in the interest of safety. They see it as an occupation, understandably so, because we actually have to see both sides of the coin there. But the reality is nothing gets done without the public's help, and the police are a necessary, where people like it or not, they're a necessary part of society. And what we do is what we do. We enforce the law, sometimes not with something that people like us to enforce, but that's our job. That's our career. That's our profession. And we're here to help. We're not here to vilify. We're here to help. And once we get back to that concept and understanding that police are there to do a function, to help the public, and that the prosecutors work in conjunction with police, as opposed to this anti attitude toward what police do. And it seems to be a lot of that. And I'm talking about prosecutors in general, where they already vilify the work we do and just kind of defer or decline to prosecute. And it also comes from laws that were changed that had no engagement with law enforcement. The criminal justice reforms in New York State had no law enforcement agency, no prosecutors' offices at the table when these laws were created. And that is a failure of the legislators to realize the police are necessary to engage in public safety. And they didn't. And now you're having sort of a rollback You're seeing a lot of the silent majority that was out there who was quiet and accepted these laws, these changes, and were vilifying the police, realizing, oh, wait a minute, look what was done in our name. Maybe we have to reassess these laws, reassess these evaluations of the police. And all you can do is hope for it to change now, that people are going to see the laws that were made, that were created, and change them. Because we're now emboldening criminality, where police work for the victim. When I was a detective, my job, and I tell this to my students all the time, you work for the victim. That's who you're paid by the police department in the city of New York, but you're working for the victim. And it seems to be, in the last few years, we've emboldened criminality by making the perpetrators victims. They're not stealing to save for a loaf of bread anymore. I don't see it. I'm watching it doing, security, watching people coming in, trying to use stolen fake credit cards, trying to use stolen identification to purchase things. And this is high-end stuff. This isn't about feeding your family. So maybe we have to really reevaluate what we've allowed to happen and recriminalize the criminal. Reform is always a good idea, but reform must be in conjunction with the agency that you're reforming. At least let them have their say. We did not have our say during those reforms in New York State. Not one law enforcement agency was involved, or prosecutor's office. It was done as cops are horrible, cops are evil, and here we go. And what have you have now? You're seeing the perception of crime. Numbers may go down a little bit. The numbers go up and down. Statistics are they are. But the perception of crime, not just in New York, but in other cities, is that it's out of control. So maybe we have to reevaluate. And you're hoping that these legislators realize that, and the prosecutors realize it, that we really need to clamp down on the criminality, because most of the criminals are recidivists. And it seems to be we're giving them carte blanche to do whatever they want around. And we need to realize police are not the issue in this case.
Well, now recently, because I live in Jersey, so I'm by New York, and there's now a law that, if you steal an item under $1,000, you're just free to go. Basically, they're not allowed to report you. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that another example of what you're talking about?
Yes. And the thing is, you've emboldened criminality. You've seen that, and I see it all the time. You're watching. There was a case, detective I know had. There was a guy who committed 4 residential burglaries, and he was going to go to grand jury about it. And he gets a call from the prosecutor's office. Oh, we let him go. Why? And burglars and thieves, when there is no accountability or responsibility to these individuals, will do it again. That's what they do. Burglars do burglaries. People who shoplift. There is a demand, and if we go to the root of these issues, they're not just selling it to the streets. They're probably selling them to other stores around, or there's some underground listing of fencing operations that are going on throughout these areas. You see Home Depot has massive thefts. You're seeing Walgreens and CVS, all these high levels of thefts, and there's no accountability. They're walking in, taking things, and walking out. How is that acceptable in a society? And how do you tell your kid who's watching this, if you have a child with you, that it's okay? The revolving door, and they know this. They know this. That's what criminals do. They are taught this. They're educated. They're informed. And who tells them? Their attorneys when they go to court. And the attorneys defend them, and that's the way the criminal justice system operates. But they know if they keep stealing $100, $200 worth, $300 worth of stuff, nothing happens. They get a ticket and go home. They're supposed to appear in court. And if they don't appear in court, a warrant is issued. So they get a warrant, they get arrested, they get sent another court date. Bail is to maintain the fact that people are going to go to court. That's the premise of bail. But then sometimes you have to think of the dangerousness of the individual and the opportunity they have to commit it again. If a person commits 47 grand larcenies or 47 larcenies, either grand or petty larcenies, they're going to do it again if they don't get punished. And they say it when they walk out of court. You watched, there was a photo still about the assault that took place on those two officers in Times Square, in the Times Square area. And one of the individuals who was arrested and released was giving everybody the finger. What does that say? Where is the accountability? If you make police accountable, why are we not making criminality accountable? Criminals accountable for their actions. And it should be a prosecution to the fullest extent. Somehow it's been lost.
So a lot of the problems that we're talking about here, a lot of it seems in your case to be coming down to legislation and correcting that more than anything.
Definitely needs a change. You had a governor of New York State wanted to create more task force for shoplifting. They're already there. We know what the problem is. We have to change, reestablish the laws and reinforce the laws that were already on the books when you dealt with this. And grant you, it's something. You have to show that there's a responsibility for the criminal acts. And police you've now minimized policing, where now we talk about, certain agencies prioritize 911 calls. Like they may not show up for a day if there's no actual injury to a complainant. If it's a residential burglary, property taken, they will get listed on a C priority, and then we'll show up in a couple hours, if not the next day. You've created this situation where you have lack of police involvement through legislation. Now you have it by the population of law enforcement declining, and you're not getting a lot of people coming back. The amount of police who've left the job is head and shoulders above the people coming in. You had 38,000 officers at one time. You're now at 33, but that doesn't take into account those who are sick, those who are not working in the street, who are long-term sick, who are awaiting their finalization of retirement. You have people leaving, but those, sick, long-term sick, who's out for this, who's out for that. You don't have all 33,000 cops out in the field every day. And that is a result of what we have seen from this local, state, and federal governments. The demonizing of the profession of policing. As opposed to fixing problems, they've just decided to broad brush it and say cops are all bad, here you go. We're to the point where to find people who want to become cops, you're not. And now you're scraping the bottom of the barrel in some agencies. One agency will take anything. If you have a job for 2 years, they'll take you. People could be arrested if you're not convicted of a felony. Even if you may be convicted of a felony, as long as it's not a violent felony, you might be able to take a position. They've created this situation. And everyone knows it. You wanted to fix policing? Let's figure out what the training is. Let's see what the problems are. Why are there problems? And we've created a division. And this is the division. Us versus them. And cops have done it for decades also. It's been an us versus them mentality. But why not? Hey, wait a minute. Let's take a step back. We all need each other. Police need the public. The public are the ones who become police officers later on. Don't we want to get the best of the best? Don't you want to get people responding? Because if they see crime happening, they're not going to report it, because why? Nothing gets done.
Right.
That's a problem, a huge problem.
Right. Yeah, my uncle lives in New York, and he lives in the city, and he tells me he sees people all the time, literally just they walk in with a bag or whatever, and they steal whatever, like they'll just wipe all the stuff off the counter or the I don't know what you call them. I guess the aisles.
They used to be smash and grab. Now it's grab and go. That's what it used to be. They would come in and they would smash windows and take stuff. Now they just walk in with bags, grab and go. They'll just they'll clear a shelf, and then walk out. Now you're watching the result of that, because we have not prosecuted these crimes. These stores are now either closing or they're upping their security, where you can't go inside to a store to get a bottle of shampoo without trying to find somebody who works at the store, an employee, to open up the cage to get your bottle of shampoo. That costs money. And if a store gets continually broken into, continually have property stolen, it's going to close. And it has. You've seen it in other cities, and you see it in New York City, that they can't keep this up. There has to be a line drawn where enough is enough. And I don't see it in the legislation that the governor has pursued. I don't see it in the legislation and the prosecution that local leaders and prosecutors' offices will do. You know, we keep trying to, we're just throwing sand into an ocean. We need to have a concerted effort on every aspect, both legislative, prosecutors, and police officers, police departments, to say this is enough. Here's a strategy. We need to do this. And I saw the Bronx is doing something. They're getting on WhatsApp chats. All these stores are going on a WhatsApp chat with the officers, and they're engaging. They're trying to get real-time information to these cops out in the street. And that's great, because most of these security companies that work in these retail stores are being told by the store and by their company, hands off. If they steal something, report. Your deterrence is pretty much all it is your personal, you being there. But that doesn't deter it, report the crime. That's all you do. So you don't engage this. And the criminals know it. They know it. They tell you straight off the bat, don't touch me. And you also you want to keep your job. You don't, because it's a hands-off policy of most of this. It used to be where there was engagement, there was apprehensions being made. But unfortunately, those apprehensions by civilians sometimes led to possible civil rights violations, possible injuries to the perpetrators involved, and civil liability for the companies. So they stopped it. And now you have what you have. But you have to draw the line and say enough is enough. We're going to enforce the laws that are out there. That's all this is. They're there. But with some of the reforms that have happened, they've taken a lot of that responsibility away, where you almost have to, you have these, and there's nothing wrong with them, but these corporations, these nonprofits who are trying to, maintain some sort of supervised release for these individuals. But how supervised is that release? If you're giving it to the civilian group, how much are they really following up on that? Police are accountable. We're following up on somebody. If we have somebody we're looking for, or a perpetrator, we have to show the necessity to engage and apprehend that person. I don't know if the same urgency is with these releases, these supervised releases. They sort of get a notification, please come to court on the court date you were given. Does that mean they're going to show up? And I have a strange feeling that those Times Square individuals will never come back to court, because they don't have to. Who knows who they are? How do we really know who they are based on, we don't have really identifying information. We have some, but is that accurate? Is that accurate? We have to really think about, how do we protect those who can't protect themselves? How do we save this city, New York, and other cities from falling into this abyss of lawlessness? And it may not be they're shooting people left and right, though their shootings are up again in New York. And it's not about always murders, because murders are down in New York City, and they've been down, and they've gone considerably down since the late 90s. It's the perception of the crime. It's the cost of the criminality. It's watching stores, watching pharmacies close at 8 o'clock because they don't want to be open past 8 o'clock in a neighborhood, or just close outright because they can't afford, one, the insurance, two, the loss of property, because insurance, their insurance won't cover it anymore, and their insurance premiums go up, so they just decide to close. I mean, the In-N-Out in Oakland, I've been there dozens of times, and and the neighborhood was bad, but people there loved it. But now they closed. Why? Because the criminality took over, and the people who went there, legitimate people, no longer go to a store they enjoy. And there's where we have to figure it out. That we have to start and go, what are we doing? Did we just create a criminal element that's a permanently entrenched group? Because we don't punish them. They don't get punishment. They don't get accountability somewhere along the line, whatever it be, community service, incarceration, something to show that they cannot do this anymore.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, everybody that I know that lives in New York, has lived in New York, they just and it's such a shame too because it was such a good city at one point. It was an awesome city, really beautiful, and it was legitimately great. And I remember even as a kid not being anywhere near as bad as it is now. And even now with I saw recently with Eric Adams, the migrant, immigrant crisis where people are coming in across the border now to New York City and different areas of the country. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a federal issue. Should have been handled by the federal government. What you're seeing now is kind of a knee-jerk reaction to dealing with it. Once you put yourself out as the sanctuary city, did you have any inkling that these border states would not want to sort of export the sanctuary city that you are? And now you're in a bind. When you look at these shelters, and most of the shelters, and I've worked with people who work in these shelters. I train security for some of them. And you see them, and they're pretty much filled with migrants. And the thing is, we don't know really who they are. There was I watched a report, I watched a border sheriff showing that most of them throw out their IDs out, but before they cross the border. So we don't really know who's coming in. And are you bringing a criminal element? And so far we're seeing that we have a criminal element that's come into this city. You're seeing the lack of control. When you have mopeds and these e-bikes and all of this traffic and the illegal transportation, these people, I don't know if they have licenses to have motorized scooters. We're in a bind. Federally, the border has to be secured. That's the responsibility of the federal government. We do not, but we have to also realize that we can't keep up with this. You just had another hotel emergency act. We were actually for housing, $137 million. Where is this money coming from? What about the people who've been here, who need the assistance, who've been here for decades, who've not gotten the mental health care that they have, who have not, when you had Rikers, as everyone's saying, is such an awful place. And jail has never been nice. But where was all of the work to improve it? All we've ever see is complaining about it, but have they ever brought in true mental health professionals? Have they actually brought in that or really worked at that? Because most of the people, unfortunately, you do incarcerate tend to have some sort of mental issues. Some may be uneducated, that you might be having an opportunity to utilize the opportunities that you have while you're in. And Rikers being a jail, not a prison, they're only there for as long as as long as they are detained for court appearance, or if they are convicted of a misdemeanor. And that seems to be rare in New York City as it is. You see the problem, but all you do is say it's awful, close it. So what's the solution? Create smaller jails within the 5 boroughs, actually the 4. That going to change anything? No. The migrant problem exists, and we're seeing it explode. You're dealing with tens of thousands of families, and you're looking to change policies. At one point, and this has been the way, when years ago, prior to about 2012, 2014, we were in partnership with federal agencies. If people were arrested and they were not, and they could be deported, we would engage federal agencies, be it Homeland Security, be it, ICE. That changed. The laws have changed in New York City and New York State, where police departments are not allowed to even involve themselves with anything with the feds in that level. So, and feds can't detain anybody for criminality. They can't even put a hold on them. So you created a situation. You have these laws. You have to reevaluate and readjust. You wanted to reform the system. The reforms were done poorly. They didn't engage. And now you have what you have. You have a migrant issue. You have a criminal element within the migrant populations come here. You have a lack of accountability for the criminality, not just of the locals, but now you see no lack of criminality for the migrant populations coming in. That we are that we do not know who they really are. This has been a problem, and we see it, and somehow it is not changed. And I don't know why. There's an agenda. I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist with that, but there's something wrong. If all of the cities are going through this, New York, Chicago, LA, if we're all going through this, why are we not just really reevaluating overall? We got to change this. And that starts the federal government with dealing with the crossing the border. And now you export them up here, and that's what Texas has done, and other border states are doing, because you put yourself as a sanctuary city. In Roxbury, they just closed. I was watching something in Roxbury. They just closed the only shopping center they had. I think it was a Walmart, and they're opening up another migrant shelter. And there's a guy screaming, "What about us? We lived here all our lives. What about us?" Government is failing its own people for whatever reason. And if we're supposed to do the right thing for everybody, for those who can't speak, and this is the solid majority, again, who live here. I'm not saying it's wrong to come to the United States. I know a lot of people who've come legally. What are we doing? Why are we letting this happen? And you get no answers from anybody. And you'll have people, blame A, B, or C, but hey, it starts with the top. It started, and now you're seeing a change in policy by the federal government, where now we're looking to put a wall up. We're looking to curtail it. Is it because it's an election year and it's become a major problem for cities and people being upset? I don't know. We really have to, the money being spent is killing what New York City had. And I grew up in New York City. I grew up, and there were a lot of dangerous places. New York the trains were bad, but the thing was, New York was New York. New York wasn't LA. It wasn't Boston. It wasn't Chicago. We all kind of look the same. That's another thing. New Yorkers were always tough. Trains were always bad. People getting pushed off the train tracks back in the 70s when I was a kid. It starts up, it ebbs and flows. Dangerous times in transit always has happened. But in comparison to what the 80s and 90s were, it's definitely better. But it could be always better, because you have to punish those who are continually committing crime. And we're not.
Right. And well, with regards to now police officers themselves that are currently they're either starting out, mainly, that'll be the main person I'm referring to. But the rest of police officers that are just starting out, getting their foot in the door, what would be your advice to them?
Everything changes. There are ebbs and flows. I've actually spoken to officers. I try to see cops around all the time. And some are near the end of their career and they can't wait. They're counting the days down. Some are just starting. Some have already been jaded. I met some cops who had 3 years on the job, and they seem to be so miserable at what they were doing. But realize some things. When you have a career, there's an opportunity to move upward in that career. There's potential to do good, even though sometimes you may not think it is. By just putting that uniform on and being on the train during rush hour, or just being in a neighborhood and just driving around, you're doing something. And you've got to engage the neighborhood. You've got to be involved. I met 2 rookies. They were really good. I had a situation they really helped me on. And they didn't know I was retired until I told them later on. But they were like, what could you tell us to do? And I said, talk to people. Now you have this How Many Stops Act, which now kind of causes a problem with that. And nobody cared either, where now you have to document either rightly or wrongly the gender, age, and race or ethnicity of the person that you're engaging with in an investigative encounter. But, you know, if I'm in the street and I say, hi, how are you? Or if I'm in the train system and I engage in conversation, could that be considered an investigative encounter? We've divided it again. But cops need to know to talk to people, know how to treat people respectfully. And even when it's not, know how to handle that situation. You know, that's my take on it. You can be a good cop by being you, talking. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Everything okay with you? When I was talking to these cops, there was a person who was probably intox. I wasn't sure. Might have been emotion disturbed. I don't really know. But his hands are in his pockets, and he came up and he babbled. He was mumbling something. And I told the cops, make sure you watch his hands. And they're like, what? And as I talked to the guy, I said, hey, guy, what's going on? How you doing? Where you got to go? And he mumbled something. I said, when you get on the train, I'll get you on the train with me. So I put him on the train with me. And it's no great shakes on my part. But it's sort of teaching them going, there's a way of talking to people, even though you may not want to. If you talk to people at the level, that de-escalation, it's about relating. It's relationship. That's it is. You relate to the person. You talk to them. You get a lot more done. There are times when you will have to fight and be ready for that and watch your six, watch your back, head in the swivel and all that. But be cognizant of what you're doing and learn how to talk to people. And that makes a difference. It makes a difference. Because you may be in trouble one day, and that person you treated well will make that 911 call for you to say you're getting hurt, you're being attacked, you're being assaulted. Or we'll be the 911 caller who helps apprehend a perpetrator for a shooting or a homicide, a murder. That's what you want. You want to be that person. The police department says, be the change. It's not be the change. Be yourself and be good. Be a good person. Be a good cop. And how you do that? Talk.
Do you have any advice for young people in general?
Well, I was actually talking to, I've been teaching a course in Introduction to Criminal Investigations. That's my semester course. I have a couple of classes with that. And I say the same thing. It's like you have to really engage. You can't be a fly on the wall anymore. You have to know what's going on around you. Be educated. Be informed. Don't get caught in the buzzwords. And then, you know, when I was doing my courses, they always say he didn't de-escalate the situation. I was like, what does that mean? What does that truly mean? Understand the terminology. When you hear the buzzwords, you have to explain that. You know, he didn't de-escalate. I'm into de-escalation. What does that mean? I de-escalated the situation. How? It means nothing. Be educated. Be informed. Be knowledgeable. Know what's going on around you. Know your local governments. Know your state, your federal government. Know what's being out there. Educate yourself. Read all you can. You could read some newspapers. Find all the open source materials. Watch the mayoral address, the state of the city. Watch the state of the NYPD with Commissioner Caban. Watch those things. See what they're saying. And is what they're saying actually what they're doing? You know, watch the Hochul State of the State address. Watch when these people watch these city council meetings. See what if you can watch them online, and you can. There's sometimes they're open and available to you. See what's going on around you. Don't get caught sitting on the phone waiting for, just isolating yourself and not caring. Because when you don't care, you have what you see now. Almost, it's borderline lawlessness, where at one point we all work together for common purpose. But within the criminal justice system, we're noticing that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. That we're both all separate entities doing something that is the antithesis of what we should be doing, which is the right thing, and keeping the city safe, keeping the public safe, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. But young people have to be engaged and be involved. And if you're going to protest, know what you're protesting about. Say it all the time. If I ask you if you know what you're protesting, we're going to have a problem, because I want to know why you're there. And you need to know, not with the buzzwords, not with the one-line statements or the slogans. Know what it's for. Know why this is happening. Know your legislators. Know the community. Know your neighborhood. And that's the simplest thing to do. And the way to do it is engage yourself. Talk. On every side. And so you could develop your opinion. When I teach my courses, I tell them, well, they have one day they can hear my opinion. I don't give my opinion ever again on my course. What I will give them is the facts, and you take the facts and you make them, you understand the facts, and then you could make your own decisions, your own judgments if you want to go A, B, or C. But be informed, be educated, and be knowledgeable what you're going to do in life.
All right. I think that's a good place to end off.
Okay.
All right. I'll end the recording and I'll talk to you a little bit after the show.
Sure, I appreciate it. Thank you much.
I appreciate you coming on, though. Any last words to the audience or to me?
Again, thank you for the opportunity for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's something that I really like to do. Sometimes it sounds like I'm pontificating, but the reality is that I just want to get out there that there are people who appreciate law enforcement, that there is that silent majority out there, and keep doing the best job you can for those in law enforcement. Keep doing it. And for those who are not, understand we're all in it for the same reasons. We're all on this planet to do what's right for each other and continue to do so.
Thank you, man. You're welcome to come back anytime. All right.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you much. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. And the recording, we'll talk about the show. Yep.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
I'm going to stop recording here too.